Music biopics have become an entire industry. More than ever, they're getting pumped out into the cinemas, it seems. The Bob Marley one, Amy Winehouse, Elvis, Pharrell Williams did a biopic in Lego for some reason. The Bob Dylan one is coming out soon. And a good 90% of the time, they're all exactly the same. There is a real paint-by-numbers formula to them that I think most people are really fed up with now. Take a star that people remember well enough to be mildly interested, rope together some feel-good version of them becoming famous with a little fall in the middle where they forget what it was all for, and then have 4 or 5 of their most memorable songs in there. A scene where they're just playing whatever hit, or sometimes manufacture a weird scene where they create the hit. It's boring, it's lazy. Are music biopics going to kill themselves off with repetition? Well, that's where we need to talk about Better Man, that just released in cinemas. Because this is a film that does something very strange in order to try and stand out, which is to have the main character appear not as himself, but as a monkey.
For the next 2 hours, your ass is mine!
And the thing is, that's not even the strangest thing about this movie. It gets weirder, a lot weirder, and we're going to discuss all of that and how I think it all tells us a ton about biopics as a whole. And if you're up for that, stick around, watch a train move across some water, and we will begin. By the way, the film is still currently only out in cinemas, so to spare this getting as repetitive as a music biopic, I'm not going to play the trailer over and over again. For a lot of this, we're going to enjoy the visuals of a Dave's Walks video, and a link to that will be in the description. So, we should explain it first. Better Man is a 2024 biographical film about the British pop star Robbie Williams. Narrated by Robbie Williams himself. Already it's weird, you know, 1, that he's a monkey, 2, that a man who isn't an actor is starring in a movie about himself. Yes, we're going to come back to that particular thorn in a second. What you immediately think here is that this is a dumb gimmick. And that makes sense, because I imagine there's a lot of people watching this right now thinking, who the hell is Robbie Williams? That's another thorn. Because Robbie Williams was massive in the UK and Europe as a whole. I was born in 1995. Growing up around that time, he was just everywhere. He was as big as it can possibly get in the UK. I cannot overstate just how big Robbie Williams was, except for the fact he didn't make it in America. Somehow the appeal didn't translate across the pond, partly I think because they didn't push too hard for him to succeed there, but various reasons. It doesn't much matter. What it does mean is that making a biopic about him, yes, there's an appeal for that kind of movie in the UK and Europe, but not at all in the US. Why would anyone watch a music biopic about a person they don't even know? And I think the answer here is, well, let's try and make it look a bit different then. Let's give this film a new marketing edge. Monkey! The problem is, same with Pharrell Williams but he's Lego. Robbie Williams but he's monkey can't not feel like a gimmick. And actually, I think how weird and gimmicky that feels makes it much more likely to put off the audience who do know Robbie Williams than it does to entice the people who don't know him. Also, the fact he narrates his own movie. You know, at worst, it looks really big-headed and self-indulgent, which I don't think it is, actually, but it could look that way. And at best, you've slightly damaged the main appeal for all biopics, the one thing that does entice audiences, which is the curiosity for how well can whatever actor impersonate this famous celebrity. How well can Timothée Chalamet sound like Bob Dylan? How well can Rami Malek play Freddie Mercury? It's kind of intriguing. Robbie Williams is here played very well by John O'Davies, but because of the mask and because it is Robbie narrating, you're not as easily able to compare, and in fact might even misunderstand and think Robbie Williams is voice acting as well, which is what I thought at first. From a marketing perspective, everything about this movie feels like a bizarre swing and a miss. It requires in all of the trailers for Robbie to attempt and explain why they're making it and why the monkey before anyone can be enticed.
Why the movie? Why the no?
But that's all just the marketing. Things get way weirder when we actually discuss the content of this film. Although, first I do need to mention this.
My dad was well enamoured by...
Well, Danville!
You're either born with it
Oh, you're a nobody.
Oh, you better believe it's World Anvil. They are sponsoring this video, they are offering you 51% off, and they are an online tool for building worlds, you may have guessed. But also creating characters, designing and managing campaigns for all sorts of different games. My best friend uses it for D&D, but there's lots of other games. You can use it for planning your stories, writing your stories, working on all sorts of creative projects. For me, it is my novel. I need a tool like this, otherwise I am far too chaotic. We're moving flat soon, and I literally have 6 cardboard boxes full of random sheets of A4 paper I've written old ideas on. Pre-World Anviled me was a nightmare. So with something like this, not only can I keep everything organised, keep it all in one place, be able to easily edit things, but I can create timelines, I can create hyperlinks branching off specific characters or articles or a billion other things that just make it so much easier to find stuff. Planning things can be hard, especially when there's so much to do, but having all of these tools to help visualize it, to help split everything down into specific points, articles one at a time, it helps immensely. I'm not going to show you because it's a secret, but I've created different bio pages for all of the characters in my world, even the minor ones, which house they live in, what their job is, who they're friends with, who they hate, what different beliefs they have or opinions about events that go on in the book, or whatever. So, World Anvil is great. I hope you can hear my passion, and if you desire, if you crave. If you call to the heavens for a 51% discount, then use the code TREE, or click the link in the description, or the pinned comment, or if you just want to try out the free version, then go for that. You know, there's no time limit on it. Test it out for as long as you want. World Anvil. So, the weirdest thing about this movie is that it turns out not to be a gimmick at all. The weirdest thing is that all of this is actually brilliant. It's easily the best music biopic I've ever seen. A big part of that being due to the monkey itself. Yeah, it's baffling how very quickly you just accept the whole monkey thing. That this is how he appears and none of the other characters in this world ever acknowledge it. For the first, 2 minutes, it looks a bit odd. I remember someone in the audience loudly gasped when the film started, had she not seen the posters for this movie? But after that, you do never bat an eye. You're totally immersed in a movie about pop star Robbie Williams as a monkey. Huh. Okay, firstly, it makes sense thematically. Robbie Williams began his career at 15 when he was thrown into the boy band Take That. He was picked out to play the weird, kooky one in the group, who wasn't allowed to write any music. He was just meant to be in the background harmonising and then occasionally be a bit cheeky in interviews. That was his job. And as a result, you do get a guy who feels very much like he is a dancing monkey thrown out onto stage, who does struggle with his identity as a result, when that's what you are from the age of 15. And they're kind of subtle about this fact as well. You know, never once does someone mention the phrase dancing monkey. I think if they had drawn attention to that idea, it would have felt cheap, but it's not even a major theme being explored in a story. It's just something you see very visually in the fabric of this. A side of this man so obsessively and consistently thrown onto stage to perform that he kind of forgets what he is other than the performing persona. And secondly, in that, there's a point about development. The saying we're given is that you freeze at the age you become famous. Therefore, being famous at 15, you end up kind of stuck at that age. You end up someone who struggles to naturally and healthily continue his emotional development beyond that age. Robbie Williams mentions that he's always seen himself as unevolved somehow, undeveloped, not quite grown, and you'd feel that here. It's surprisingly poignant, actually. Not to suggest it is at all, but speaking as a therapist, I've worked with a lot of people who show signs of developmental trauma, and the idea of them being metaphorically visualised as monkeys, that being their expression, there's something really heartbreaking about that being the way you see yourself. And indeed how others see you. There are signs where just in the subtext of this movie you can see people finding Robbie too much, too full on, too explosive and manic and impulsive. The fact he is then a monkey here adds to the tragedy of that. That here is someone clearly struggling with mental health issues and yet nobody's seeing it that way. Seeing it like he's a person who needs help. No, just some unevolved being. some lesser beast. Thirdly, it just really works in the animation. I mean, the facial expressions are great, but the body language you get to add to Robbie, because of him being a monkey, really elevates this film. Now he can physically just explode with energy like monkeys do, in ways that aren't quite the social etiquette, ways that people do find too full on and does make them wary of Robbie, but physically it is perfect for demonstrating that feeling. He can be leaping and shaking doors like a monkey when he's angry, screeching. It adds so much more emotion through the body language to wonderfully express how Robbie feels. Not necessarily how he is in reality, but how he feels, what he's like. Plus, it obviously makes his dancing much more vibrant and engaging here. So it is weird how something that so clearly seems like it's going to be a cheap gimmick is actually the best thing about this film. Actually adds so much meaning and emotion to it and is so integrally wrapped up into the core of what this movie is. I really did not expect that, and even then we can take this all a step further. The best thing this decision to have him as a monkey does is free this movie up to tell its story as imaginatively as it likes. Because if you do a biopic with a clear human actor, let's say, then there's a realism you expect. Do it with a CGI monkey and it changes what this film is. It's no longer, here is the story of what happened in a singer's life. Instead, it's, here is how a singer felt about their life. Therefore, everything can go completely off the rails. And Better Man does dial it up in that sense. Visually, it goes all over the place in the best possible way. My favourite example would be the big gig, you know, the typical one. Throughout the movie, every time you see glimpses of a performance done by Robbie Williams, there is a monkey in the crowd. Someone who is him, you know? A past version of him. There's the child monkey, or there's ones wearing the different outfits he's worn at different points in his life. He sees some of them in the audience and they're glaring at him. They hate him. There's this huge feeling of self-hatred that's just oozing out and he's trying to ignore it. Kind of battles against it while he's on stage. Like, you see Robbie upping the manic quality to his singing and his dancing as though to try and shut that out, as though putting a barrier in place. But each performance, there's more and more of them in the audience, until you get to this big gig and he's performing Let Me Entertain You to hundreds of thousands of people, and suddenly they're all around him and we peel away into a red, smoky war ground. And there's a full-on battle scene as his mic stand becomes a sword and he's skewering hundreds of these monkeys that are trying to kill him, killing more and more of himself until he feels like there's nothing left. It sounds kind of cheesy when I explain it like that. It's a shame the film's not out beyond the cinemas to show you the clips, but it really works. It really does. And even just on a basic level, it means all of the musical numbers here are very interesting. It does never feel like just playing a hit because that's the one people will remember, you know? Each of the songs are very organically weaved into the story. They each tell the story and are genuinely moving a lot of the time. It does remind me, as much as I tend to dislike pop music, Robbie Williams was actually pretty good. There are some very vulnerable, moving songs in his repertoire. Okay, there is the one scene that is most like your typical playing the hit for the sake of it. That's the rock DJ scene. But even then, I think it's adapted to a different version of the song that better suits the emotion of that scene. And there is still a point to it. You see them kind of taking over London, dancing their way across. A great expression for this being the moment they feel like they've made it. The pure kind of elation and power of that before they realise how scary it is. She's the One. That's, I think, a pretty good but expected romance song. In this movie, we see it reworked into a duet with Nicola Appleton, who was his girlfriend at the time. And they used that song in this film to express what their relationship was like, so it's magical and airy, but as this song goes on, you're also getting hints that something isn't quite right. And you see them hanging up a baby mobile in a room they've been decorating, but then Nicola is talking to a strange man whilst Robbie is shut out of the room, peering through a window. Then you get an eerie shot of her in hospital, and suddenly the kind of magic of the music feels tragic here instead. The song really cleverly flips in that way, and we end up with the baby mobile cracked on the floor. It's quite subtle, I think, in a lot of ways. I mean, I might have missed this point had Kirsty not told me in advance, but Robbie Williams' relationship broke down with Nicola Appleton, who is herself a singer, when her record label forced her to abort their child, which is awful. But here's the interesting thing there. Here's kind of what I want to say in this whole video. That plot point itself could have made for a really good story, all about their romance and the effect of being forced to abort their child and then the fallout of that afterwards. There is a lot to be explored in that idea, but in Better Man it's only subtly expressed before we move on to the rest of the story. And this is the thing that causes most biopics to not quite work. The idea that there's no space to explore anything properly because you've got to charge forwards to the next bits in their life. You know, you only get a couple of scenes of them as a child, and then you've got to do the teenager bit, and then you've got to do when they're starting out to become famous, and then so on. Unable to properly focus and extract the depth from each bit because there's all the other things you have to include. And if you don't include them, then people are annoyed for not getting to see the things they wanted to see. Biopics either end up too much a surface level kind of cliff notes of someone's life, or too contained into one specific moment. How do you navigate that problem? I think Better Man does offer an answer. Exactly what I was just detailing in my example of She's the One. If you only get a small amount of time to directly explore certain themes. I mean, obviously they all crop up again at points in the story, but you know, a small amount of time to really focus intensely on them. Then what you do is make use of the music to tell that story. What you do is put together an absolute blinder of a music video and make use of the fantastical visuals to make the audience really feel that experience. Really immerse them in what that bit of the story felt like for the character. So much so that when you do come out of the song, nothing more really needs to be said. It's all there to feel and see. At its best, music should elevate the story of a film, not grind it all to a halt, and Better Man does a masterful job with that idea. I did not expect the repertoire of Robbie Williams' pop songs to so powerfully tell so much meaning of someone's life. That too is quite weird, I think. So yeah, I've not seen that many music biopics, but I think this is the best one I've seen by an absolute mile. It's not flawless, I do have some problems with it I could discuss, but it's super imaginative. It's super original despite technically still hitting all of the beats of your typical music biopic, and it's also very genuine. You know, you could call Robbie Williams big-headed for starring in his own movie and narrating it. It is arguably a little indulgent in moments, but the reverse of that is that you're getting quite a vulnerable, authentic self-expression. A man openly daring to show how it all felt from his eyes. I think the authenticity adds a charm and a level of accuracy to this film, and he certainly doesn't paint himself in a positive light at all either. He's pretty brutal at portraying the ugly sides of himself, which is arguably one of the big themes I suppose here, a man struggling with feelings of self-hatred. If you want more thoughts on the movie, Kirsty and I have recorded a much bigger discussion about it that will be releasing on our Seconds channel soon, alongside a discussion about the recent Wallace and Gromit movie, Vengeance Most Foul, but also, if you're like us and you have nothing better to do with your time, then join us for a live stream on New Year's Eve. We're putting together something of a quiz and various games. We're going to talk about TV shows we've seen this year, plans for 2025, hopefully just talking with you all in the chat. It was really fun doing that for 150,000 subscribers. It'll be something chill but fun to either ring in the new year or possibly listen to at whatever other time it is in your time zone, so look out for that. I imagine it'll be quite a small amount of people because everybody's likely to be busy on New Year's Eve, but for those of you who are not, hopefully it makes for a nice little cozy thing. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Flying Spider, Grace, Kellyanne Davidson, Luke Orr, Michael Gallagher, Chad Bramwell and Joshua C. Follier. Thank you.